My name is Sally Fowler, and I'm the owner and trainer for Disabled Advantage Dog Training and Consulting. I'm a new service dog business in Central Missouri to teach people how to train their own mobility service dog, specifically for chronic pain that affects mobility disorders, but generally anybody who needs mobility service help as well. And I want to thank Dr. Angela and Country Vets for sponsoring this event today and bringing wonderful refreshments and frisbees and slip leashes. And it looks like she has some brochures back there as well. I saw a deal for new pet visits, so you should definitely do that if you have a pet. Today I'm going to be going over what is a service dog or a service horse, what are a team's rights, and when you can ask a team to leave, and time for questions and answers at the end if you've ever had a situation where you needed to ask a service animal team to leave, or someone with an emotional support animal, or some other similar situation. And I want to encourage you to ask questions as they come up to you while I'm talking, as opposed to just waiting at the end, because it might be relevant to whatever slide is up. And it's actually easier for me if you ask questions as opposed to me having to think back through everything that I said. So the first thing is, what is a service animal? And under the Americans with Disabilities Act, the definition of a service animal is a dog or a miniature horse that has been trained to do tasks or works to mitigate a person's disability. So by law, it has to be a dog or a miniature horse. And other animals like cats and monkeys, they're allowed in some states, but they're not allowed by federal law. The most important thing to understand is that the Americans with Disabilities Act, shortened called the ADA, covers the owner. So the dog isn't the one that has access, the owner has access. A lot of people get confused on that point. But the ADA says that the owner with the service animal can go anywhere that the general public can go, with a few exceptions, and we'll talk about those. The handler must have a disability, and the dog may or may not be vested. So Austin is always wearing his gray vest when he's working for me in public. When he works for me at home, he's usually naked just because the vest is a pain to put on all the time. But if I were to leave his vest at home, federal law would still say that it's okay for him to work as a service dog without that special identification. The problem is that makes it really hard for you guys to know for certain, yes, you're a service dog, no, you're faking it. What are tasks or work? Tasks depend on each person's disability. I've made this video to give you guys some examples of tasks that you might see a service dog doing in public, because they might look different than what's done at home. For instance, Austin helps me do laundry at home, but you're not going to see him doing that in Walmart. So some of the most common things are finding help, finding a specific person, picking up objects, getting things off of a shelf, putting things in a shopping cart, bracing, helping people stand up. Or they might alert to seizures or diabetes, things like that. So it really just depends on what people need for their particular disability. I specialize in mobility tasks, so a lot of what my dogs do are helping me stand up, helping me walk. There, Austin is interrupting, kind of like an anxiety attack. My hands shake really bad, and if they shake for too long, my arms get really fatigued, and opening doors. He really hates his job, as you can tell. But what are the differences between service dogs, therapy dogs, and emotional support dogs? And I know this has been getting talked about more and more in the news, which is awesome, but unfortunately, people are still not getting the words quite right. And in your folder, you have a few things that I forgot to cover at the beginning. There is a printout of the ADA for you guys, so you have the exact verbiage of what the Americans with Disabilities Act says on service animals, if they need to be wearing something, when you can ask them to leave, and things like that. Following that, there's an expanded frequently asked questions written by a representative at the DOJ who gets a lot of these questions about the ADA, and so they came up with longer answers. Things like, can I discriminate based on breed? No. I serve food. Do I really have to let a dog in here? Yes, and things like that. And following that, I made a handout that goes into more in-depth descriptions on the differences and facts about service dogs, therapy dogs, and emotional support animals. And then also at the bottom, other types of working dogs and the names that you may have heard for them. But this is a primary problem because a lot of people use the wrong word, and words are really important. And service dogs have a lot of different names. They're called service dogs, mobility assistants, balance assistants, assistance dog, a mobility support dog, and I wish people could keep the names the same because it would make it so much easier for you guys to understand what you're facing in each moment. But a lot of times people say therapy dog when they mean service dog, or they say emotional support dog, but it's really a psychiatric service dog. In general, the differences are that service dogs have to go through 1 to 2 years of rigorous training to be service dogs. It takes a really long time to learn how to do this. There's socialization training for focusing around various distractions, task training for actually learning how to do their job, and then learning how to do their job around other people and in public, obedience training, and all of that bare minimum could take 6 months, but more realistically, it takes several years to do it well. They have to assist with a handler's disability. They can go anywhere the general public can go. And under federal law, certification and registration are not things. So they're not required by the ADA and the DOJ. Certification and registration are voluntary in a few states. Missouri is not one of them. So that's where it starts to get a little confusing. And then even some cities have voluntary registrations. The only way you know a service dog is a service dog is based on its behavior and its ability to work. The DOJ put a lot of thought into making it as flexible as possible so that people like me could train their own service dog and not have to jump through a lot of hoops to get their dog tested at specific places and get specific certifications, because they thought it would be too hard with everybody's disability to be able to accommodate everybody. So they didn't do that. Other countries are a lot more strict about how service dogs are handled, and the United States is different. The downside of that, though, is that it lets fake service dogs run around and emotional support dogs parade as service dogs. Therapy dogs, max. Takes 1 to 2 years of moderate training. The handler can be healthy or disabled. Their job is to comfort other people. So Max's job, Austin's job today is to sleep, but also to help me if I need his assistance. Max's job is to be here and visit with you guys. If you guys need some stress relief today, that's what his job is for. And we're hoping to find Max a place to go and comfort people on a more regular basis, but he hasn't found a job with that yet. Therapy dogs also go to schools. If you've ever seen kids doing reading programs where they read to the dog to build up their confidence, that's a therapy dog. We're going to disaster relief zones. That's been a big thing lately, unfortunately, with all the school shootings, is volunteer therapy dog teams going to help with the aftermath of that. Certification is actually recommended for therapy dogs. They get a lot more recognition, and they need to be invited places in order to go. Emotional support dogs, they are no other way to put that. They are pets who their sole thing is that their presence comforts their person. And their owner may or may not have a disability. They might have a medical condition that isn't to the point of being a disability, or it might be a disability. But having their dog or their cat with them helps them feel calmer, or helps them have purpose, or helps them feel like they can conquer the day. But the dog or the cat wasn't trained to do that. Nobody put the dog through a bunch of exercises to prepare them for that, or to teach them how to do it. And so that's really the biggest difference, is there's no training involved, there's definitely no oversight, and they weren't trained to do a job the way service dogs are trained to do a job, or even the way therapy dogs are trained to do a job. Max underwent rigorous socialization training and exercises to learn how to interact with people. Their access is very limited. Service dogs can go anywhere the general public can go. Therapy dogs go where they're invited. And emotional support dogs, their owners can have them in non-pet friendly housing and therapy appointments, and that's it. So for Connective Health, if somebody wanted to bring an emotional support animal, it would be a case-by-case basis. You guys could say, well, you know, we can try it, but we do reserve the right to ask it to leave, because we're not legally required to let your ESA be here. You guys are legally required to let me have Austin there, but we're going to talk about if Austin was barking at people or biting people or smelled just absolutely horrible and was covered in mud when I came there, you could say, hey, let's leave Austin in the truck, or let's put Austin and Adam in the parking lot for your massage, and that would be legally allowed.
If I can comment,
yeah,
I've been asked to sign paperwork signing off animals to be emotional support dogs or animals, and I almost always never sign them.
Good.
Right?
Yes.
Because it puts you in a horrible position.
Yeah.
Because it's usually an untrained animal, and this person who, I realize they need the animal.
Yeah.
But the animal can cause problems.
Absolutely.
Being brought places, and I typically just say no.
Yeah.
Or, because it's usually an absolute stranger and a dog that I've met for 5 minutes, and so anyways,
yeah,
I don't like it.
That's very good that you do that.
A lot of human doctors tell patients to get a pet for emotional support, and the problem is these people may not be able to afford the care for these pets, and then it gets a disease like parvo, and then the dog dies, and then the person's a bigger wreck. And so anyways, I've seen a lot of stuff like that. So
thank you. No, thank you for adding that. And you can, in your folder, I also included underneath the bright orange flyer, there is a paper with coupons on it, and you can make copies of this and print them out. And if you get somebody who has a dog and they're like, hey, can you make it an ESA for me? You can say no, but here's a coupon to a dog trainer I know, and they might be able to help you on this path.
Right.
And they can come be my phone.
Now you can tell them, like after 6 months of training, like they can get kicked out, right? Like there are some dogs that are not capable, like I don't want, like she's horrible.
Yes.
And my roommate in vet school had a dog that was born and raised a service dog that got kicked out of a program for a genetic defect. But she was supposed to be like for blind people. So I know just a little bit enough to be dangerous with that, because I lived with her for a few years.
So if you get somebody who wants their dog to be an ESA, you can kick them to me, give them a coupon so they can save a little money. I will educate them on the laws and how that process actually works. And if they're actually interested in training their dog will get the training to actually be stress relief. A lot of pets are stressful and people don't realize it.
It would be my dog's case. Your cousin made more
She
stress.
my cousins made more stress than
And a lot of people don't realize too, their doctor needs to write the note so that they can get access to the housing, but there is nothing to do with the vet signing off on your dog being an emotional support dog or a therapy dog. The only thing I could think you would come into play for is if somebody wanted official documentation. When we took Austin to Colorado for our honeymoon, we made sure to get an updated list of all of his vaccines, and we had our vet sign it so that, because they were adamant that if we wanted a service dog there, we needed proof that he was healthy.
Yeah.
And so we did that. So that would be something that would perfectly be in your scope. But yeah, you can't magically say, yes, this dog is safe.
Yeah.
So real quick though, I do want to talk about service dogs in training, because this is something that the Americans with Disabilities Act doesn't explicitly cover. They do say that service dogs in training are not full service dogs. But under Missouri state law, which there's a tab for that says Mo on it, and Missouri is one of a few states in the country that recognizes that if you are actively training a service dog to be a service dog, that it will cover your access rights to take your dog into non-pet friendly locations for the purposes of training. And Missouri also states that if you're owner training the dog, you become the trainer of the dog, and so you have access rights. So you wouldn't necessarily need to be affiliated with a fancy program to be able to take your dog to non-pet friendly places. This is extremely beneficial for teams because it allows us to help prepare our dog for more realistic scenarios than they get just training in Lowe's or PetSmart over and over again. But it's harder for businesses because service dogs in training have a lot of kinks to work out. They might not be perfectly behaved yet, they might still be vocalizing, but if they are a threat to your business or they're dangerous, Missouri doesn't explicitly go into detail on when you can ask a service dog in training to leave, but I would imagine it would follow the same rules as the ADA would be acceptable for asking them to leave, and we will get that. But I wanted to bring up service dogs in training because a lot of people don't know that Missouri protects owners who have these in-training dogs. So Missouri has on their disability portal, they have a 25-page document that lays out service animals, and you guys are welcome to download that and print that off if you would like, but I didn't want to print out 25 pages. So I cut and pasted some excerpts from that document that lays out a little bit more detail on if your business is a public accommodation, common mistakes that are made, things like asking for a pet deposit or proof of disability, or segregation is a thing that businesses try to do sometimes. The most common instance I've had with it is going to restaurants. We'll go in a restaurant and it's like 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and so there's nobody in the restaurant, but they still put us in the back of the restaurant just in case other patrons come in, and that's not legal. How should you handle a service dog team who does come into your business? Under the ADA, you can legally ask 2 questions. Is this a service animal required because of a disability? And what tasks or work have they been trained to perform? Unfortunately, if somebody refuses to answer these questions, it's not grounds to ask them to leave. And I do disagree personally with this because I feel like any responsible service animal team should be willing to answer these questions. And if somebody gets really offended that you ask these questions, I would worry about that person, just as a professional myself. but you cannot ask for documentation on the dog's training. You cannot ask for a demonstration of the tasks, and you cannot ask for details or proof of a disability. You can only ask these two questions. And most people, most responsible teams that I've interacted with will say, yes, this is a service animal, and he does mobility for me. So he braces and opens doors and finds people. Under the ADA, people only have to train one task. Some teams have more, some teams only have one. It depends on each person's disability. My first dog was trained 13 tasks to help with mobility. Austin is probably going to surpass that because he's bigger and can do more for me. If a team refuses to answer these questions, the best you guys can do is state your right to ask those questions under the ADA. You can have a copy of the ADA with you and say, this is what I've learned about service animals. These are the questions I'm legally allowed to ask you. But like I said, failure to answer the questions isn't a reason to ask them to leave, unfortunately. And I say unfortunately because I've seen a lot of news articles and videos of people who learn about the ADA and kind of treat it like a golden ticket of, you have to let me in, the law says so, and it really grates on me that they learn it and they parrot it back, and it seems like something that a lot of teams who aren't legitimate they get really upset the more questions you ask. When can you legally ask a service dog team to leave? Under the ADA, you may ask a team to leave if the dog is out of control and the handler isn't taking steps to get the dog back under control. So if you've ever been to the dog park or PetSmart on a Saturday, just imagine how those dogs are largely acting. If you have a service dog team come in that's acting like that, that's not okay. Running around, maybe it's off leash, jumping at people, barking nonstop. If the dog isn't housebroken, if it pees or poops in your establishment, that's a sign that it's, even if it is a service dog team, that's a sign that you can ask them to leave. Or if the dog poses a direct threat to patrons or staff, they're biting, they're lunging, things like that are all grounds to ask the dog to be removed. But you still need to find a way to accommodate the person after the dog has been removed. So maybe the dog goes and sits in the car, but then you still finish helping them some other way. And in your case, Angela, you might get some nervous peeing, so it's a little harder to gauge some service dogs at the vet. Some teams work really hard to make sure that their dog is still going to be level-headed at the vet, but some dogs struggle at the vet either way.
I don't kick dogs out for peeing.
Yeah.
They all do. They all do.
When working, I did want to bring up a service dog is legally allowed to work off leash as long as they're still under control by voice or hand signals. I typically don't work off leash just because I like always having a line of communication with my dog that I don't have to use my voice for. I rode horses for most of my life, and a leash is a lot like reins connected to a bit, and without it I just feel kind of too loose. But I do know a team who works off leash, and the difference is pretty significant. A dog who's running around off leash, out of control, sniffing all of the things, running up to all of the people, versus a dog who's technically nobody's holding the dog, but it's walking calmly next to its disabled handler, looking at them, going and doing something, and then coming back to them, is going to look different. There are, at the back of your folder, I included a one-page sheet from Assistance Dogs International, and they are a organization that accredits various trainers and programs through a membership program, and you have to pass the certification to be accredited through them. But they're a reliable resource for people both in the States and internationally for finding assistance, finding a service dog, or being hooked up with a program. And they also have a reliable source of information for learning about service dogs and learning about service dog law. So if you're looking for extra places to learn, Assistance Dog and Dogs International is a place to go. And they developed, along with another organization called the International Association of Assistance Dog Partners, a list of minimum accepted standards for a service dog. So this sheet is not a legal reference for you guys. This is not a law. This is not a reason to ask a team to leave. I wanted to include this purely to help you guys build a mental image of what a service dog looks like. Because I feel like there's not enough effort being done to portray that picture. So these standards are things that service dog trainers all kind of just agree on. We all follow it when we train our dogs, the responsible ones do at least. And it's things like the dog is clean, they're well groomed, they don't smell bad. You're not in a room and you go, oh, there's a dog in here. They don't beg for attention. They're not annoying people. They don't vocalize a lot. They're not constantly whining or barking or just sitting there staring at squirrels barking at you. Or they act calm. They focus on their person. They're trained not to go to the bathroom inside. They stay within a certain distance of their person. And these are all things that even the people who own or train your dog responsibly, they look to this as like, okay, this is what I'm aiming for when I'm training my dog. So in general, this is how a service dog should behave. And it's something that does kind of unify service dogs and service dog training. They strongly recommend that all teams take a public access test, either through a trainer or even if that trainer didn't train their team, they find an evaluator who puts them through a public access test. And at the bare minimum, have you guys heard of the Canine Good Citizen tests that the AKC does for pet owners? Well, the AKC does offer tests that pet owners can go do that covers really, really basic things like the ability to sit when people walk past, or the ability to leave a piece of food on the ground, and good behavior in general, ability to listen to their person. The AKC has 3 tests actually, and each of those target harder and harder skills for working in a suburban or a city environment. And the final one covers things that service dogs specifically might encounter, like how to ride on an elevator. And that helps look at the dog's ability to focus on their handler and maintain calm and composed when they're working in public, and feel a little bit safer that that dog's going to be able to be a safe dog working out in public as a service dog. Do you have any questions about this particular guidance? Okay. This is a video that I compiled to give you a visual demonstration of the level of public etiquette that I particularly train my dogs for, and I train all my clients to follow. Even if their dog doesn't end up being a service dog, I want their dog to be able to be respectful when it's in a pet-friendly establishment. So these are some of the things you can look for in how a dog is behaving or not behaving when they're in your establishment as a guideline. I will say one difference between myself and other teams is that other service dog teams, the dog might be up to 2 feet away from their person when they're working in public, and that's perfectly fine. I keep my service dogs very, very close to me because they do fall prevention, and so they need to be right next to my leg. Other teams might have the dog a little further away there's a task called blocking, where the dog creates space around the handler, and so in that instance, the dog might be a little further out or might be in a different position next to the handler. And that's Max demonstrating walking near a shopping cart. So you can see he's a little bit further away from her, and he is not learning blocking. That was actually his first time with the shopping cart, so he was figuring out life. But do you have any questions about etiquette or what you would look for in how a service dog is behaving versus an out of control pet or ESA? Okay. Go to the next slide. Are there other times and reasons you can legally ask the service team to leave or restrict access? Areas the public can't go. So if you happen to run a burn unit, it's okay to say the service dog team can't go in there. Or the back areas of connected health where the rest of your patrons aren't going, a service dog team wouldn't go back there as well. If it would fundamentally alter the service or function, so areas in the zoo are allowed to restrict where a service team can go because the presence of the dog would be too agitating. A new one that I don't have confirmed clarification on, but I suspect are things like goat yoga or kitten yoga, where there are kittens or goats present in the yoga setting. I imagine a business owner would be able to say, hey, will you be able to function without your service animal here because their presence will interfere with the goats or the kittens. Yeah, we're still here. Other examples are private clubs, private homes, and religious spaces. Service dog teams need to be invited into those places. And it's every single time. So just because a private club lets me and Austin come someplace doesn't mean that they've suddenly opened up their doors to all service animal teams. You have to be invited every time. Religious spaces are a little weird, but I believe it's the separation of church and state on that one. And then private homes. But if you change your private home and make it public for a little while, for instance, if you had a garage sale and your garage was open to the general public, a service dog team would be allowed where the garage sale is happening. Allergies, fear of dogs, and breed discrimination are not legal reasons to refuse a team entrance, nor are I had a bad experience with a team once. If somebody has an allergy, they can take it upon themselves to move further away from the dog team. If somebody has a fear of dogs, same. And any breed can be a service dog under the ADA. So a lot of people are hesitant to let pit bulls in their establishment, even if it is labeled as a service dog and people say it's a service dog, but it's not a legal reason to ask that team to leave. Frequently asked questions that I get, some of these are covered in the frequently asked questions packet that you guys have, but some of the other ones, we talked about certification and registration. If they ask ahead of time about an ESA, all you need to remember is that ESAs are not covered under federal law. It is not your obligation to allow that ESA to be there. Neither are therapy dogs. So it's always recommended that therapy dogs ask for permission and show an ID when we find a place for Max and Maddie to work, they will have an ID and they will have a certificate issued by me stating that they've passed a public access test. And also she'll be given a card with my information on it. And if anybody has a problem with her, they had to throw her out. She's been unruly. Max has been biting people, not anticipated at all. They would call me and double check on that. For ESAs, it's your discretion based on your client's needs. So if somebody really does do better with their ESA there, you take it on a case-by-case basis. What if a dog grabs merchandise? So in the video that I showed earlier, my first service dog, Robbie, was shown picking merchandise up off the floor and putting it in a shopping cart and also taking things off of shelves. That is a very normal thing for service dogs to do. Where it's different is if they grab something and then run away. If that happens, it's more an unruly dog or an untrained dog. But a dog who very focused gets one thing, they might paw at it a little bit, but then they pick it up and they hand it to their person or they carry it someplace, is a very different thing. That's a trained task. And it is a lot harder to train than you would think, so usually a lot of time has been put into it. We had a bad experience with a team. If you ever have a bad experience with a service dog team or a fake service dog or an emotional support animal, I'm very sorry that that's happened to you, and I hope it doesn't happen again. But you cannot legally discriminate against all service animal teams just because one team was not presenting themselves accurately or well. How can you tell when you are not sure? You can rely on your two questions. Is this a service animal required because of a disability? And what tasks has it been trained to perform? You can look at their behavior, like we talked about. You can look at their gear. Some teams do work naked, but a lot of teams do have some type of gear on. They have a leash wrap that says service dog, they have a bandana, they have a vest. Usually they do have something, even if it's as discreet as a dog tag that says service dog on it. Most teams like to work with something because we do have, on our end, we call them public access issues. And it's when the store owner comes up to us and says, hey, is this a service dog? And sometimes when they know the questions and they know how to word them right, it goes smoothly and it's not a problem. But a lot of the time we get business owners who have heard the questions, but they get the wording wrong, or they come up and they have a really aggressive tone of voice and we're just instantly put on guard. I know I personally hate going places I've never been before because there's always some part of me that's like, oh gosh, what if I get questioned? And sometimes it goes well, and then other times I have had to leave places because I know the laws, I've explained them numerous times, and no amount of me regurgitating the ADA helps my situation. And so that is one reason Austin always has his gray vest on, so that it's way more immediately obvious that he is working. But more and more it's really easy for anybody to get a vest that says service dog on it. And that's where the rest of the picture comes into play. Knowing those questions, listening to their responses, knowing your own rights, and seeing the dog's behavior as well. I strongly recommend that you come up with a service animal protocol to help all of your staff be on the same page on how to handle problems when they arise. Who's responsible for handling the problem, or who gets called, what the order of operations are. We've been to a lot of places like bigger box stores where they have one thing posted on the door that they're not pet friendly, and then you go talk to the employees and they say, yeah, it's fine to bring your pet in. And then you have one person who's adamant on what is accepted for service dogs, and then you have another employee who no dogs are allowed whatsoever. I don't care if it's a service dog, get out. And having a set protocol would help all of your employees we go, we look at this paper, this is what we do, and save a lot of confusion. My advice for handling problems is determine who should handle problems with animals in your business and have a copy of the ADA ready to back you up. In your folder, there's a tab with you written on it, and that is off of the Missouri Disability Portal. It's a flyer that summarizes everything I've talked about today and has the questions on it and has reasons to ask the dog to leave on it as well, with links for both the Disability Portal and the ADA as well. And if you take this anytime you need to go talk to somebody about why their dog is there or why their cat is in your business, you can take this flyer with you. And it just gives you a little bit more credibility that you genuinely do know what you're talking about. And try your best to stay calm, polite, and professional. Ask them to leave and explain why you're asking them to leave. You're not legally required to explain why you're asking them to leave, but in the experiences that I've had where it's been really gruff and brusque, it's like a bad, were the Furbies the one that talked to you? It's like a bad Furby where they only know 2 sentences and they keep repeating the same 2 sentences over and over again, and it's harder to take that, it's harder to deal with that and interact with that than it is someone who, hey, so I need to ask you to leave, your ESA has growled at 3 people, is making people feel unsafe, we feel it's a dangerous animal, here's how we're gonna accommodate you in another way once your ESA has gone. Or, hey, your service dog has pooped in the corner 3 times, I don't know if he's sick, maybe it's just a bad day, but we're gonna have to ask you to remove your service dog, we're still gonna help you this way, and here's how we might handle this in the future. And then I really recommend recording a note of this, write it down somewhere. Susie brought her service dog in and it bit 3 people. Here's how we handled this. Because if you have multiple staff, they're gonna make up their own thing for handling it each time. And if you have a repeat person who is reliably a problem, you want everybody to be on the same page for how to handle it moving forward. And if you're not the boss, you can then take it to whoever is the owner, and they're more equipped to have a big picture of what's been going on. This is the time to ask questions or share a problem that you have had or a problem that you've heard about in the news and wondering how you would fix that problem. Or if you have questions about disability or service dog teams in general, even if they are slightly offensive, I encourage you to ask them to me because I am prepared to answer anything today, and then you will not surprise someone on a potentially bad day for them. Thank you.